Hello, everyone. Welcome to CraftQuest. My name is Justine Manzano. Today we're here to talk about bad writing advice. Now, we've all gotten it. We've all seen it around the web, and every now and then you hear a winner. There is a lot of good advice out there, but we're here to refute everything that you've heard that is wrong. So let's start with introductions. My name is Justine. I am a young adult writer. I am a blogger. I am an editor at CraftQuest, and I'm currently working as an editor at Writers in Motion. Let's go on with the rest of the panel. Ari?
Gotta unmute myself. Hi guys, I'm Ari. I'm one of the editors at CraftQuest. I'm a book blogger at Bookish Valhalla, and I write science fiction, fantasy. I do a little bit of everything.
Hi guys, I'm Maria Tarot, young adult writer, editor for CraftQuest, editor for RevPit, and now writer in Motion. All around loving fantasy and historical. On to Megan.
Hi guys, I'm Megan. I'm a YA writer as well and freelance editor. I also am a literary. I'm sorry. What are you doing? Sorry, a literary agent apprentice for Corvisiero. Don't ask what just happened. For Corvisiero, and I'm also an editor at CraftQuest with this lovely cast of ladies. So, take it away to this bad writing advice.
Okay, I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and start by discussing what your pet peeve bad writing advice is. Do you have a particular thing that sticks out that you totally hate? So I'm gonna give you guys a minute to think about it because I have one that is like on the tip of my tongue already. So my big pet peeve is kill your darlings. Because kill your darlings means a very certain thing, very particular thing. And a lot of writers think that means to kill a character off. And it drives me insane when I hear that. So to kill your darlings is what it really means is, you know, that line that you wrote that you think is a masterpiece and you're like, oh, this line is perfect, or this moment between characters is perfect. And when you do revisions, you sit there and you go, well, this doesn't really fit my story anymore, but damn it, I'm going to change the story to make it fit because it's such a good line or a good character interaction. And you end up doing your story a disservice when you don't make that revision and try to shoehorn in lines that you fall in love with just because you fell in love with them, and even if they don't serve the story properly. So that is what kill your darlings means. It means take that line that you love, take that character interaction that you love, and chop it out when it needs to be gone. Because if not, you will turn yourself into a pretzel trying to keep it in and only do your story a disservice. So it is not about killing characters. Characters should only be killed when it serves the story, not for shock value and not because you think that you're supposed to kill your darlings. Kill your lines, kill your character interactions, kill your scenes that don't positively impact the story and move it forward. Okay? Ari?
I can sense that you're trying not to rant about that. I'd say like my biggest pet peeve would be like when people just being told not to write descriptively at all. Avoid any sort of descriptive anythings, avoid going too crazy into descriptions. There should be a balance for sure, but what ends up happening is some people take that literal and just tell the entire story, and they avoid putting any sort of descriptive like emotions, actions, just all these things that add to the moments in each scene. And so I would say, just instead of thinking of it as like entirely getting rid of any sort of description, only describe what you absolutely need to, what's pertinent, what readers need to know in each scene about the characters, the setting, etc., and try to balance it out. I don't know, it drives me crazy because I am a descriptive writer, but it also drives me crazy because I can actually see people get so stressed out about adding any description, like any sort of extra detail, like, oh, well, don't describe that the jacket is green, like that doesn't matter. I don't know, maybe the character's favorite color is green and it matters to her. I don't think doing that is necessarily bad. So don't take it too literally. Just remember what people are really saying behind the advice, at least what I'm hoping they're saying, is have some balance between like the show and tell, but don't completely strip description. Like, don't tell anybody to completely take out description, because yeah, it's I don't know. I'm a descriptor writer, so like it bothers me. It's personal.
Maria?
Hi guys. Yeah, so just thinking about it because I have a ton. But probably the one that I see the most that really bothers me. Let's rewind in time to, like, I don't know, the 40s or 50s. Do you honestly think that Tolkien, you know, actually experienced Middle Earth and knows about elves and has a hobbit for a best friend and maybe a dwarf as an uncle? He does not know his own fantasy world. He did not live his own fantasy world. Writing what you know has nothing to do with the plot. It has to do with the emotional arc of a character. It has to do with their emotional journey, about things that you have experienced and translating that then onto the page. So writing what you know is probably my biggest pet peeve because so many people don't understand what it means. So it's about taking your experiences and translating that into the character. That's probably my biggest pet peeve right now. Megan.
Oh, Maria, I could feel you gunning for that one, Maria. I would say mine is not so much for the writing advice, but more for this assumption that you need to pay a ton of money to have an editor, and then that editor will magically guarantee that your story will be published. As ideal as that sounds, it's not exactly true. Your story will need editing no matter what stage it's in, no matter what story you write, etc. But there is never a guarantee in the publishing world, and that is very daunting and terrifying and scary, and I understand that. But there are a lot of people I've seen on Twitter particularly who just decide that they're going to be like, oh, if you pay this crazy amount of money, you'll definitely get published and everything's going to be fine. And like, that's what, you know, what my guarantee to you is. And I'm like, I freelance at it. And I want people who have stories I edit to succeed and be awesome, become a book one day, because that's amazing. But I can't guarantee that this is going to happen. What I can guarantee is that I'm giving you advice that I believe and hope you will use to make your story stronger. It is still up to you and publishing and tons of other factors for that dream to work out. So when I see people being like, oh, you should pay for an editor, or you should get money to do that, or like if you don't have like an editor read your book, then it's not a good book. And I'm like, well, there are critique partners, there are beta readers, there's your circle of writer friends who will definitely read your book for you and give you advice. And with any situation like that, you should always research into whoever it is that's claiming to be able to be an editor, because on the internet it's really easy to be like, oh, I edit books, and then there are no credentials, there's no work that anything leads up to, and there's no guarantee. And also I just find it a bit crazy if someone is saying you need to pay me a crazy amount of money, go into debt, and I'll publish your book. Like that just seems a little bit far-fetched. But unfortunately, that usually is a tactic that's used for newer writers who don't know the industry or who don't know what's happening. So number one pet peeve of mine is definitely that, because I've been on both sides, and to be taken advantage of sucks. That's number one. And to be an editor and see other writers at various stages get taken advantage of also sucks. So do your research is definitely number one. Two, if an editor says the only way to get published is to spend a ton of money for my services, probably not legit.
Okay, so I have 3 points to piggyback off of your 3 points, and then I'm going to throw something out there for you guys to discuss. So Ari, piggybacking off of Ari's point, there should always be a balance of show versus tell. You can't go, you'll feel it in the pace of the story. If you're reading the story and you're getting too caught up in the description and you're sitting there forever and nothing has happened, you will get bored and you will know that your story is starting to drag because of the description. There is a huge, giant gap between purple prose, the purplest of prose, and, you know, he walked to the store, he saw a window and looked in, and there was a boy, and he was like, no. There's a huge space in between. You can go anywhere in the middle of that without getting too bogged down. Sometimes it only takes one or two descriptive phrases to paint a scene, and that's what you really want to go for, is to sit in a paragraph and find. And that's not to say that that's all. I can see Ari ready to fight me. That's not to say that that's all you need. I'm not saying that you should keep it to that amount, but I'm saying that your words should pack power so that you don't need as much to create as much of a scene. And
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, just to like further elaborate on the point that that's not the end goal for everybody. It also highly depends on what kind of story you're writing. So if you're writing, say, a contemporary story, it's most likely not going to have as much description as if you decide to move into a fantasy world.
Yeah,
like, there's a reason why. Yeah, there's a reason why fantasy has the highest word count, because most of the time you're building a new world, or like a world so far removed from modern world that you need more description and you need more setup, and you need, he walked to the store, he saw that boy, is not going to work in a fantasy without it being painful. So
you won't know what's going on, especially in the fantasy world where you have to paint that picture of a place that nobody has seen before. It's different than when you're dealing with, boys' gym locker room. Like, you can pretty much say the smell and the a couple of visuals, and you have painted a boys' locker room. But that is not how you paint the castle on the hill in Elvenland. Like, that's not gonna do it justice. So you really have to.
Yeah, it's the difference between like a common setting versus a setting you don't know. So, for the locker room, like, most of us probably have seen what a locker room is. So I don't need every color of the locker, unless for some reason it's going to be valid or relevant for some later twist. But if you're like, oh yeah, we have the society where, like, each class of people operates out of a castle, and that's all I get, I'll just be like, what world, what castle, who are these people, what's going on, what society are they part of? That's just the difference.
It's like a very extreme version of the idea. Well, I mean, a very loose version of the idea, and I can't remember who said it. I'm having a moment, so if any of you guys do remember, jump in. But that if there is a gun scene in a scene of a story, then you better have that gun go off.
Isn't it like Chekhov's gun rule? Like, if you have it up on the wall in the first scene at some point before some other important point, I can't remember exactly which point.
It's basically like, gotta go off. If it's there, it's gotta go off. There has to be a gunshot at some point, because if not, and you have told us it's there, it is just an extraneous piece of information, and it has no reason to be there. Now, that's a gun, because a gun is a major element. Whereas if you're describing a painting in the room to set us, like, give us some scenery, or, set a feeling, then that's different. You can still do that. But I'm saying, just find the balance. No, there is such thing as too much, but there is also, not enough, and you could drown. And Ari is looking at me and wants to yell. She wants to yell.
I'm not actually fighting you on this. I was gonna give you examples. So, like, one early draft I have, I mean, it was kind of verging purple. I love purple prose, but you have to understand, purple prose is like a very poetic thing. So, like, it's acceptable in poetry, but not at, like, anywhere else. So you could, like, be pretentious in poetry, but nowhere else. But, like, for example, I think I was describing, like, an entire room, and everything from, like, the sides of the books to the way it smelled to every single detail in the Persian rug. I see it vividly like a movie. So when I'm going, I'm just like, here are all the details, man. Perfect for screenwriting. I should give that a try. But just kind of go nuts. That's extreme. And that is over descriptive. That is like verging purple prose, because even as I'm reading it out loud, I actually have to take breaths like through the paragraphs. My golden rule is, if you're reading a paragraph, like a sentence, and you have to actually take a breath, it's a very long and draggy outies. That's not even English. Draggy outy. It's very long. It's very dragged out. So it's, you know, you can, less is more is something I'm learning, definitely. Less is more in some regards, and in some circumstances, like say the gun, there's like Justine was saying, there's a difference between adding a detail in somewhere deliberately, you know, as a device to be revealed later, versus drawing attention maybe to something about a character, which is important, but not, you don't want to be overly descriptive on some of those details, because you don't want to draw too much attention. You want it to be there, but you don't want it to like be obvious.
The character. I'm sorry, Maria's about to say something. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So my son came home unexpectedly with my husband. They're gone again, so now I can chime in. I'm very excited. He's very loud. So just to what I always take that back to with the Gone, with everything, is cinema. Bring it back to the cinema, the movies. So even a TV show. If the camera like zooms in on, let's say, the detective is standing right there in front of a crime scene. He's flicking one of those Zippo lighters, right? Just whatever. And then the camera zooms in on him flicking that lighter. Suddenly we know as viewers that there is some serious significance to this lighter all of a sudden. So unless what you're describing, because bear in mind, when we're describing, in the writing world, it's the equivalent of zooming in the cinematic verse. So unless that is significant in some way, shape, or form, we shouldn't be describing it. Like, unless grandma's ceramic tiled cat that you spent 2 pages describing in your first 5 pages, which I don't recommend, has something to do with the alien invasion that comes later, I definitely wouldn't be describing that ceramic vase. Sorry, just wanted to put in my 2 cents.
I was just like agreeing, despite the fact that she thinks I was gonna like disagree. I mean, I love purple prose, but I understand, like, in terms of when other people are writing my stuff, they may not enjoy the self-indulgent descriptions. But I want to stress that don't be afraid to be a little self-indulgent in the first draft. Don't be afraid to put in details. I think sometimes people take that advice literally, and then they don't give you any descriptions, and any at all. And so I don't want people to be afraid to. So at least in the first draft, just like put it all out there. Just play with it, you know. It's yeah. And also what Megan said earlier, like, not every story, I agree with her. I agree with everybody, okay? Not every story is geared to being more descriptive. Some of them actually work really well being sparse or having fewer elaborate, ornate descriptions. Fantasy is great for having it, but maybe contemporaries are not, like she said, or some contemporaries. But it's also like the writing style. So like if you're just not naturally an overly descriptive person, that's fine. Maybe play with it if you want to explore. But also, you know, just go on, Justine, I'll stop.
Okay. So to piggyback off of Maria's point, I wanted to tell you guys that in our July topic is actually going to be how to implement writing what you know into your story, and to take experiences from your life and how that can affect your story and make it feel more genuine. And so we're going to have a whole hour-long discussion in July about that. We'll release tweets saying when and where. So stay tuned for that. And then to piggyback off of what Megan said, nobody can guarantee you publishing except for a publisher. And no one can tell you.
And even then with the publisher, it's 50-50.
But that depends on the publisher now, doesn't it? Very, very small pubs can sometimes be a problem. But anyway, when you're dealing with, definitely not an agent, they have to sell it to the publishers, and an editor has to wait and see what you can get to an agent. And so there is no guarantee. And even those publishers can't guarantee that it will sell. These things, there are no guarantees in writing. You write your best book, You don't leave it in the hands of people who are going to, you know, like, you get it past the gatekeepers by doing the best you can, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But the best is all you can give. And you keep working and you keep honing your craft, but there are absolutely no guarantees. And I just feel like that's a huge problem that I feel like a lot of people fall into, where someone can, because I've had a problem before. And it's what Megan and I were just laughing about a little bit, where I got swindled a little bit by a small publisher, not money wise, but more like hopes. I got promised stuff that they weren't able to pay off on. And me and my husband, and so, because we're both writers, and the publishing company ended up collapsing, and my husband had one book out, and that then went out of print, and he had a series, and so that series may never see the light of day because of that. My book never came out, and even in the publishing business, your publication is not guaranteed. So I get very, very frustrated. I tend to root for the underdogs. And so the people who are new on the scene in the writing community, when they're hearing things like, when people are throwing out words like guarantee, it pisses me off, honestly. So I'm very defensive of people like that. So if you ever see me rant on my Twitter, I do subtweet sometimes about people like that, because it does frustrate me. And I do want to protect the new writers in the community from people who make promises that they can't keep and are expecting you to pay for those promises. And it's entirely not fair. And there are you can pay for an editor, and editors are, I mean, we're editors. It's not like I'm sitting here saying never pay for an editor, because I would lose business. But I'm honestly telling you that there are free services out there that can help you if you cannot afford an editor. You can do CP swaps, critique partner swaps. You can get beta readers, group of friends that you trust that do understand writing and can help. And Maria's raising her hand.
I just want to put this out here right now. Like, people you trust. Don't just be giving your work willy-nilly to anyone on Twitter who says, "Oh, I'll read your first pages." Make sure you know the person. At the very least, maybe know someone who knows the person. You know, there's lots of hashtag groups out there. You know, just network a little bit. I get very leery of just giving my work out willy-nilly. Just wanted to put that out there. Sorry.
No, it's a good point.
Sub-tip to Maria's thing, like, if you don't know someone, a good thing to do is, well, one, make sure that a CP definitely works in like your genre and audience category, because that could be a huge deal otherwise. But also, just like, if you're unsure about somebody, you can offer to swap a very minimal amount of pages. And if it looks sketchy, or they seem to be reacting badly to your work, or you do something that doesn't, like, you know, give you the wrong vibes, you don't have to send any more, and you haven't lost a lot. Especially because, like, it's one thing if you say, like, okay, let's swap an entire manuscript. That is a whole book that you don't know what's going to happen to it. A few pages and you get the bad vibe and you leave, like, that's much safer bet. So just to Maria's point, be safe, be happy, keep writing.
Oh, and by the way, if you are looking for a CP and you have trouble finding one, we actually have a forum on our website at craftquest.org that you can sign up for and post what you're looking for in a CP, and hopefully someone will bite. So there are ways to network and meet people. And we offer one too, but there are plenty of other ways. There's a CP match event on Twitter. Hashtag CP match, I believe, is the actual hashtag for it. So keep your options open and look. But again, like, those are unpaid ways to get a view of what people will think of your work and to start polishing it. If you are going to pay for an editor, make sure that you have done as much as you can before you do that. Because if you're going to do it, if you're going to pay for an editor, you want to be ready to, like, you want to be it to be as good as you think it can be before you take that step. Then you'll get that extra set of professional eyes that can look at it and go, well, wait, and help you, like, view it from a different perspective. Go ahead, Maria.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in a little bit. So also, don't take out a loan for an editor, please. Please don't take out a loan for an editor. Are you insane? Don't you do it. And no editor should be charging you $4,000 for a developmental edit. I'm putting that out there right now. Research your numbers. Look on the EFA's website. There are regulations and standards that should be met, and you should not be taking out a loan for a developmental edit. A lot of good editors, ourselves included, can work out payment plans with you, for if you can pay incrementally, because we also have to eat, but you should not be taking out any kind of loans for an edit, and no edit should cost $4,000 or even $3,000 or even $2,000. All right. The average for 100,000 word novel is in between $1,200 and $1,500. I'm just putting it out there. Okay, that's it.
Absolutely. Anyone else on this topic?
I'm just gonna say, if you take out a loan on an edit, I'm coming for you. With my role
editor who expects someone to take a loan out. I'm for you.
That happened to me. What was it, last year or the year before? I can't even remember my years anymore, guys. I'm approaching 30. You'll have to forgive me. But
you're so old.
It's my brain. It's gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not gonna say where I went. But I went somewhere looking for an editor for my sci-fi. I decided to look for one because I really did not know where to take it at that point. I'd had so many rejections. It was bad in hindsight. But I wanted to rewrite it and I didn't know where to take it. So I did. I think it was Courtney. Megan, I can't say her last name. Courtney
Radikash?
Yeah.
That may be wrong. I'm sorry, Courtney. I hope it's not.
She actually, was one of the ones who approached me and said, "Whoa, that's like a lot of money," because they wanted $4,000 for like 80,000, 85,000 words. It was like 4,500. I think the lowest one I found was like $2,600, and I'm like,
but Ari, it's a guarantee. You're going to be guaranteed. It's going to be guaranteed.
Like, look at all the books that I had edited already, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, yeah, but you could have uploaded those. Like, anyone could just tack a book cover. I'm very, very skeptical. But I did not like the number, essentially, and then what they were saying I was going to get out of it just didn't make any sense. So if, like, your gut is telling you, like, this doesn't feel like a good deal, yeah, don't feel bad about turning it down, because $4,000 is a lot to pay when in comparison you could probably get an even better editor somewhere else who will put more time and attention into be able to work with you more one-on-one. Okay. Because I'm imagining that these people probably just don't have time. I don't know. I just found working one-on-one with just a slightly, not cheap, but she was a reasonably priced editor, and I feel like I got so much more out of it. So just be wary when you're looking, because this was a reputable place that I looked beforehand, and this was there. So just be willing to do your homework and research into just different price ranges and what you need out of an editor versus how much you're going to pay and what you're actually going to get. And if you have a bad experience, don't be afraid to tell people, to warn them. Just saying, like a proper bad experience. So that's all I was going to say.
Also, pro tip, like with CPs, you can also ask editors for a sample edit. So, and they most likely will give you one. And if they don't, that's already kind of a red flag. Usually 5 pages is pretty standard. So you can, get a chance to get a view of their editing style. You can most likely see how they respond to you and your queries. And you can also see what stuff they're going to be pointing out. So if you're not sure about someone, or if you just want your own personal research, ask for a sample edit. If they say no, that's a big red flag already. And just go from there, just to hopefully avoid you spending way too much money.
Okay, I'm going to start throwing out a couple of bad writing advice tips that I have received from from CraftQuest listeners, followers on Twitter. And let's see what we've got. Grammar and spelling don't matter. It's the story that counts.
Grammar and spelling matter. They absolutely matter. So of course, some things of course are going to be overlooked. I mean, something misspelled isn't going to, an agent isn't going to sit there and be like, or a publisher isn't going to sit there and be like, that's it. We can't give them an advance, we can't sign them, whatever, because they use the wrong there. That's fine. It is what it is. That's things that can be ironed out in editing. Unfortunately, when we're talking about an entire book that's every single sentence is filled with unnecessary commas, semicolons, colons, N dashes instead of M dashes, or hyphens, hyphens instead of
M dash Maria.
M dash Maria.
That was my big edit on one of Maria's
years ago now, but yes, because
yes.
A lot of people don't know how to actually make an M dash on the keyboard.
I just copy mine to the internet and stick it in there.
Yes, right. Well, if you guys have a numerical keyboard for Windows, it is Control Alt and the minus symbol on the little calculator side, just so you're aware. Hotkeys. But yeah, so I mean, when it's an entire manuscript like that, we can't read it. We can't read it. That's the problem. And agents are editorial, publishers are editorial. So when you can't even get past the first couple of pages because your brain is melting, you can't get into that beautiful plot. So it matters.
So this is going to sound really snobby, guys, and I apologize in advance. I am a bit of a grammar snob. Oh, sorry. So we are artisans of the craft of words. Words are our thing, guys, and sentences, and you can bend the rules, but you have to know them first, and you have to find ways to bend them that still remain readable. So while yes, a typo here, a grammar screw up there will not make or break your story. Like Maria said, it is horrible on the eyes when you are an editor and you read a piece that is just completely fudged up grammar-wise and or spelling-wise, because we can't get to the nitty-gritty of like trying to figure out if the word choice is the right word choice, or I mean, I have had manuscripts where there are words missing. A grammar screw up happened. The sentence no longer makes any sense. There are words missing, and I cannot even tell if the sentence fits in the story anymore because something happened, a couple of words went missing, and I'm reading it and I go, I have no idea. And actually an edit I've given, I have no idea what this sentence is trying to say. I mean, it's not an intentional, like, I hope it's not offensive, but when I write it and I try to, I mean, we all do it sometimes, and it's all, I mean, I've even, Maria is one of my, like, I've edited or CP'd her work several times, and I found them on her, she's found them on mine, particularly because an editor can never edit their own work. And that is like, that's fine, that happens. But if your entire piece is stuff like that, then you are gonna lose the reader.
Especially when it's elementary things, and I don't really mean that in a snobbish way, but when it is kind of elementary, when you send your work to an editor, it's supposed to be the best version of itself. It's supposed to be already query ready, because we're supposed to take it to a whole other level for you. It's not just line editing. It's not just, I like to take out all the that's that should have been taken out beforehand, the filler words, filter words, whatever you want to call them. I mean, so that's a misconception as well. When you're giving a manuscript to an editor for developmental editing in particular, we're not supposed to be line editing or copy editing or proofing your work. We are just supposed to be concentrating on the developmental side of it. So you're actually, at that point, then we can't do our job. We can't developmentally edit it because we are now line editing, which takes a hell of a whole lot more time, and you haven't paid us for that. So that's something as well to consider. So just make sure there's so many options out there. I know a lot of people use Grammarly. I'm not a fan of Grammarly. I'm a huge fan of Pro Writing Aid, which is a lot cheaper than Grammarly. It's not a monthly subscription. I believe you can buy it outright for 1 year. It's like 1 year rental for like $50. But if you want to buy it for your entire lifetime, it's a good investment. I think it's just under or just over $200, which sounds like a lot of money, but it catches homonyms, it catches filter words, it catches so much, it's not even funny. The algorithm is so, like, you can pick and choose what you want it to catch. And sometimes you have to do it a paragraph at a time because it's so in depth. The whole thing is highlighted in a rainbow of colors. Like, these are sticky words, get rid of them. And it even gives you some suggestions, which is nice. It's an incredible piece of software. We're not affiliated with them or anything like that, but it is something that I really, really do recommend. And it is a cheaper option. If you can run a manuscript through something like Pro Writing Aid, you are now ready for developmental edit.
Now I want that.
Wanted to say real quick, I stopped using Grammarly because I actually found it made a lot of mistakes, a lot more mistakes than I was originally willing to give it. And also, when you rely on the one in like your Word or even in Google, they also make mistakes. They just don't take context into account, or style. Some people do have stylistic differences for, like, if you're writing a poem, the style is going to be different. Google doesn't know like the difference between using grammar for one and grammar for the other. Punctuation for one and punctuation for the other. So it's not really gonna catch as many things. I don't know. I used Grammarly up until last year when it kept trying to make me change a word, which I knew was being used correctly, but it just disagreed with me. It said it doesn't fit in the sentence. This doesn't make any sense. But when I actually I went into the thing and looked up the word, made sure I was using it correctly, I definitely was. And there are just many other issues. So I stopped using that one.
Those grammar checks always yell at me because I start sentences with "and."
You know what, honestly, I actually bought this book called Know Your Shit, or Grammar. Know Your Shit or Know Your Shit. It's like a little grammar cheat sheet of like all the things people on average get, just mess up or forget about grammar. I think I got it was on sale at Barnes and Noble. So it was like $6. Because I feel like research is a huge part of being a writer, and I'm sorry, I do forget the rules of freaking commas so occasionally. So I do go back and review like every year just to make sure. And this book just breaks it all down and just tells you like the proper usage and stuff. And so a tool as simple as that can really go a long way when you're going through and editing by yourself that first time or two, and is probably more reliable than Grammarly. Just saying. For me.
All right, I'm gonna throw out another one. Writing can't be taught.
Okay.
Go ahead, Maria.
Girl, where's my cup of tea?
I'm in a writing program that teaches.
I need a cup of tea, let me tell you. When I first started writing, God knows how many years ago now, listen, I don't even have that original stuff. It was fan fiction. But my first book, which I talk about often because it was a disgrace, it should have never seen the light of day. I can't even believe I queried it. When I look back on it now, I just cringe. I cannot believe that I wrote it. It was didactic. It was the story was still good. Don't get me wrong. The plot was still good, because that's how I roll. However, it's just a chore to even skim over it, to read it. English literature major over here, so, I'm very Austen centric, very, all this. If they can write, I can write, all the rest of it. So that's how my original work was. So if we look at that and then we look at where I am now, it is a huge difference. Writing can be taught. And just because you word good, or you wrote some good essays, or, you're a literature freak and, you think you can be as literary as the best of them, does not mean you can write something publishable. They say that on average, it takes 4 books before you get signed by an agent, however long that takes. Okay, so think about that. We are always evolving. We're always self-developing. We're always learning. And if you're not, you're doing yourself a disservice. Writing can be taught 110%. Because if today Maria could speak to yesteryear Maria, it might not have taken 20 years to get here. So just saying.
I just want to comment real quick and say
Okay.
that I am currently a senior now in an English program, literature, and I've actually learned far more from the writing community in terms of like just learning self-taught wise actually than in my degree program, which is kind of sad. But it is all very much self-taught. Writing, literature, any kind of form of art or humanities really evolves across time. So you really should be just, you know, just learning as much as you can, you know, we're naturally learning creatures. So we're always picking up stuff anyways, you know, like being a part of the writing community has actually taught me a lot about not just being a writer, but being an editor, about being a human being, being an advocate, you know, a supporter of friends and stuff. So there's a lot to learn, and don't think that you have to have a piece of paper to like, you know, say, oh, I have like an English degree paper over here, because it all comes down to like your motivation to improve your writing, to look at something and see where you can make it better, make it more accessible to people who are reading it and resonate with them, or, you know, that your message is getting across. I don't think anything that I write actually looks good the first time. It's just like an ugly, just a hideous thing, and it takes forever. I mean, some people, yeah, it takes a lot more than four drafts, just because that's their process, and that's okay. But the point is be receptive to learning, and definitely you can learn if you have an open mind, motivation, the passion. You know, if you are focused on it, you can do it. There, I said my stuff.
Okay, next one. Said is dead. Look at Maria.
All right, I'm doing this one.
Get it.
One, just no. So there is a convenient usage of the word said, particularly when you need to get through dialogue quickly, or it's not a conversation that we need endless details about what characters are talking about. While I do agree that it is nice to have some variety instead of he said, then she said, then they said, then he said again. Said has a purpose. It's just the baseline response. Also, sometimes like you can build, well, most time actually, you can build off of the word said. It doesn't have to just be he said. You could say hello. He said, and then have a whole other description about how they're like responding, what their expression looks like, what the tone of voice is. Like, it's not a dead all word. Plus sometimes it's just a word you need. So it is not dead. Well, I think you should limit your usage or be aware to not overuse. It is a valuable word in conversation.
Yeah, dialogue tags have their uses, and they have their place. You know, especially when you've got a long piece of dialogue and you know, who's speaking might get muddied up, you know. So yeah, so Megan said, Justine said, but you should always vary them. It shouldn't be after every line, you know, like Megan said. Sorry, I had to do it. I apologize. It's a bad dad joke. Okay. But yeah, like vary it up. You know, you don't have to say he said for us to understand that after the dialogue, you know, Megan then twiddled her mustache, you know, or twiddling her mustache, Megan took a sip of her coffee and then continue on with the dialogue. So now we know that, you know, Megan said the first part and now she's saying the second part, you know, so vary it up. It doesn't have to be after every single piece of dialogue.
And the beauty of said is that it fades into the background. So if you use the words, if you say, you know, Megan said, you read it and you don't even really like process it the way Megan uttered. You that's a whole different thing. Now there are like uses of that when you're really trying to get something across. Megan whispered. Like, if you're trying to create a certain tone to the conversation, you can use that, but not for every dialogue tag. Please, God, not for every dialogue tag. When you hear Megan uttered expectantly, and Justine whispered, and Megan cried, and after every line, it gets very distracting. Don't do that.
Not only distracting, but you're also not showing us the emotion behind it. You're basically telling us, which, show versus tell again. So, maybe it shouldn't be Megan growled. Maybe it should be she clenched her fist and, was trying not to smack him in the face and then continue on the dialogue, So I'll just bear that in mind too. It doesn't mean that after every single time someone speaks, you have to show it. But just bear that in mind that, they say whoever they are, they do say that, when you have to tell us how someone is emoting, which is what you're doing when you use those fancy dialogue tags like growled, uttered, Batman. I don't know.
Can I Batman? I want a Batman.
Yeah, I want a Batman. He Batman. I would imagine a very Christian Bale-esque growling happening. But so
I'm ready to see that in stories now.
You know what?
Batman.
I think Dee would Batman, or someone would Batman in Dee's mind. So I think maybe that should be added. So you're basically telling us. So they do say that, anytime you use those types of, description, like you're telling us what an emotion is, that it's not, and you should be showing it. So just be wary of that. That's where my issue comes in.
When you are using varied ones, if you do need to use them, make sure, this is just a side comment, make sure you're using the right one. So for example, if your character, one example would be like if your character's screaming at every little thing, that doesn't seem right. Screaming, like for a character to scream is like intense fear or shock or rage.
No one goes through life talking like this.
No one. Yeah, you could say yelled or snapped. So it really sets the tone for like kind of what Maria was saying, how something is being said. But you don't need to tell readers all the time how something is being said. Only, like, I would say only in important exchanges that we really need to pay attention to. And also on camp, if you say he said, she said, he asked, she asked, he said, I'm going to notice that because I hate repetitive words. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not saying that you should put like a million different dialogue tags because that'll annoy me too. But use it only when if you don't need to say like for example, I was tutoring the other day, and the person I was tutoring, we were reading this book because she's learning to read English, and she read this line where he chortled. They could have just said he giggled or he laughed, but it was like a chortle. I think that's like a little piglet laugh, but I don't know. I had to look. I was thinking of like the Trollolol guy laughing. I had to look it up for her, and I was like, you know what? In reality, people don't like this. I don't think people really, you won't see that a lot in most of the books that you'll probably read. But like that's an example. Like I don't think it was necessary in that particular place to say he chortled. You already drew him into, like the author had already made him into a very comical character. So you really didn't add that extra. He could have just said he said. And that wouldn't have bothered me. So it is like balance and just, expressing those tones and emotions when you need to without overdoing it.
Well, yeah. And like, even like being very careful, like saying she shrieked, like that to me, like she shrieked, like, okay, so let's say the sentence is, you got to be kidding me. She shrieked. Did she really shriek? Because when I hear the word shriek, I'm hearing, you gotta be like,
that's what I hear. I hear a banshee. That's what I hear.
Or she sobbed. Did she sob it? Because, like, did she sob it? And then she's normal in the next sentence. Like, she sobbed, but then, she snapped. So we're going from to like, rawr, it's just very silly. So just like, keep it simple.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's I mean, for sure, like what I would recommend is they have plenty of online emotion thesauruses. I mean, we've got Angela Ackerman's emotion thesaurus, which I use.
Always recommend that.
Because I live in that book. It was Maria's doing.
Thank you for mentioning it every single week.
I literally live in that book because Maria had mentioned it to me, because I think so many times I'd said, Maria, I can't think of, like, I know there's like a different emotion that I should be describing, but I'm not sure, so even like, most of us have to look it up, but there are also, you can just go on the internet and look. If you ask Google will actually explain to you the difference between scream and the difference between yell. I mean, that much they can do. And so like that's a good example, because sometimes there's just way too extreme for the emotion. All right, that's like a side rant, I think. It's a side rant.
So good. We love side rants.
What else do we got?
Okay. Now we're going to talk about a term issue. People get confused between indie and self-published.
Can I take it?
Did you just bah?
I Peter
Did you
Griffin.
just chortle, Maria?
I Peter Griffins. I'll have you know. And I like to use. Okay. All right, so yeah, the thing is, though, I feel like the word indie is morphing to include some other types of publishing that were not initially, I guess, under that umbrella. So the definition of indie publishing is good question. No, sorry. The definition of indie publishing is anything published. If you're an author and you're signed to a publishing house that is not one of the big five, that's what indie publishing is. It is independent publishing. It means you have a contract. It means you got paid in advance. It means that they have a marketing department. It means that your book's going to be in Barnes and Noble. It's just that they happen to be a smaller press. They're not part of the big five traditional publisher. So some indie publishers that are like that we all know of, which sound like they're big publishers because so many big authors are under these indie published like houses, would be like Source Books. Source Books is an independent publisher. That is an indie pub. Tor at one point was, but I think they were bought. Entangled is another. Yep, absolutely. So and like Entangled had Sarah J. Maas at one point. Like these are like, their indie publishing is independent publishers that are not big five. Self-pub then is exactly what it sounds like. You're just self-publishing. You're paying money out of pocket to get your stuff up on Kindle or whatever the e-platform is. You're paying Amazon to print your book or whatever vanity press that you have that you're paying money to. Vanity press then is something else entirely. That's where you are literally paying a publishing company to print your book for your own vanity, just so you have it, basically. It's for your own ego to say that you have a book published. They tend to be very predatory and they completely overcharge. All right, just for an FYI on that. But yeah, so you've a lot of self-pub saying that they're independent publisher, or, they are indie, which is fine, because I do think that, it is evolving. But when you're talking publishing world, what indie means, until that definition changes, which, it'd be great if it did, because self-publishers are independent publishers, right? Or, you are independently publishing your work, which is fantastic. It is like in the publishing world, that's what it means.
Sorry, my my computer wouldn't unmute. Okay. So another one that we have, and then we're going to have to wrap up soon, but we only have a couple more, so I think we can finish this before the end. Plotting versus pantsing, but it's a very specific one. Only plotters can write a novel that is consistent, and plotters lack creativity. These are two opposing views.
Oh, no.
I'm just gonna do it.
This is going to take up the rest of the time. I hope you know that we have 5 minutes.
Go over a little.
I can go first.
I don't even know where to begin untangling. Plotters are not the only people that can plot. especially coming from someone who's a pantser, this is why editing becomes such a crucial thought here, because if I'm pantsing, which for those of you who don't know, pantsing is when you just kind of wing it and you usually don't have an outline or some foreshadow of where the story wants to go.
By the seat of your pants.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, right now you completely throw me off with that little. No, you're fine. But yeah, so basically, like, I'm a pantser, right? So at least how I work when I pants, which sounds really weird as a verb, is I have an idea for about. I usually have where I want the story to end. I also usually have at least one idea that I want to happen for each chapter. So pantsers aren't going into this completely blind. I mean, there are some that might, but they're still going to have pieces of the puzzle. It's just they need to write it in order to get the pieces of the puzzle. Plotters can have a variation of setups and methods. So whether that's they outline first, or they have chapter headers for each chapter, or they do personality quizzes for their characters, or they have, endless amounts of things. One is not better than the other, and one does not take away from the knowledge of the other. It's just a different style of writing, and every pantser and every plotter and every person in between will have a different way of writing. So maybe plotters are better at an overarching view of their story from the beginning. Maybe pantsers are better at rolling with the punches of things that decide to change, because when you write, they're going to change anyways. But you're going to edit that story no matter what. Your plot will change, or at least improve ideally, if characters you had or needed suddenly might not be there anymore. So to say that like plotters come into with an inherent, ability that pantsers don't have is definitely not true. Because you're going to figure out more of the story as you go anyways, and you're going to edit, and it just circles back to the whole thing of, sure, that style works for you, great, do it, but it doesn't mean that one is inherently better than the other.
Anyone else on that? Or did she cover it?
Pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, last one, and then we're going to sign off for the day. Should you write to trend?
No.
Meaning, if there is something that is trendy and it is being published and it is being, it is really hyped, like when the dystopian.
No. As an agent, no.
Should you write?
Let's all say it together.
On trend.
No. Oh, that was just me. Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to do it all together now?
Yeah, sure.
No.
God, do not write to trend. By the time that you have written a book that you're like, that's trending right now. Okay. So by the time you write that book, by the time you get it queried, let's say you get an agent, you could be talking at least 6 months. By the time an agent gets it out in sub is another 6 months, because you guys are going to edit together. Then you're out on sub for maybe up to a year. Then you get your book deal, and your book then won't come out for another 2 years. So from the moment that you start writing that book to trend to the moment of it being on a shelf, it could be 4 years.
The trend will be over.
Trend will be over, and I'll tell you right now, publishing moves so quickly that it's not even going to get to an agent's phase. It's not even going to get there, because by the time, because they already know this timeline, so they know that even if this book is amazing, the trend will be over and they won't be able to sell it, and your book it'll never get in on the bookshelves. Write what's in your heart. Write the story you want to write. That's all you have to do. Be the trendsetter. Don't follow the trend.
Yeah, I was gonna say that don't, because it does take forever for your book to get published, and by the time it comes out, that trend will be gone. Plus, there are different trends everywhere in every single genre. I mean, like, I think for like, say you're writing for adult sci-fi, the trends right now are vastly different than like YA sci-fi, and they're constantly evolving, based on like what readers want, and so you're never ever going to catch up. Also, I feel like when I read a story that I've only read a couple every now and then, where I do feel like it was based only on a trend, it just seems to lack sometimes. Like, you can get so focused on the trend that it lacks that unique, like, you element in the story that's so important. So that's why I feel like it's significant for you to write a story that you, like Maria said, you feel passionate about, and one that is just from you entirely. All trends come back around, so don't chase them. Eventually, like, your ideas will match up somewhere. You know, if you're really passionate, like, I love urban fantasy. People keep telling me urban fantasy's dead. I'm gonna die on this hill. I'm gonna stay here because it always comes back around anyways, and lots of people still read it. So until a reader, like every reader on the planet, says, I don't like actually, even then I'd probably still write it, but so chasing trends is like trying to chase your own tail, and you're not really going to get anywhere. And it's not to be negative or anything. Like, some trends are really cool, and I think sometimes it might be interesting to read up on them, but ultimately, if you're chasing that trend, so is everybody else, and you are all trying to bottleneck yourselves through this trend wormhole. It's not gonna, I don't know. I just think that you should stay true to yourself and really write what you're passionate about, because that overall will reflect in what you're writing in every story that you write. So that's be you.
Look, and if you don't think trends ever come back, a Hunger Games prequel is coming out next year. Don't even talk to me, because the only thing I'll be talking about for the entirety of next year. So if you think trends never circle back around, that is a lie. And have a nice day.
Yeah. Fashion is proof that trends come back around. I saw square hair last year. Square hair. That's like what, from the 80s? 70s? I don't even know. It's all coming back. So.
And I think on that note, we'll wrap up. Okay, so thank you for joining us. Please join us next week, next month, sorry, for our, I'm speeding through time, next month for our discussion on writing what you know and how to draw from your own experiences. We are always available. If you guys have questions or thoughts about different writing advice that you've heard, please write to us on Twitter, shoot us an @ we'll talk to you about it. And have fun, write well, and we'll see you guys next month. And all of our information is in the description below. Okay. Bye.